Hey guys, how you doing? So, the Plants vs. Zombies franchise. It's pretty interesting on its own, but I'm sure most of you know that at this point, right? Well, there's another side to the franchise that you might not be so familiar with, and that side is the Chinese one. For those unfamiliar with this side of Plants vs. Zombies, basically, China loves these games, and they love them so much to the point where PopCap started making games specifically for the Chinese audience. I've already even made a whole video on some of the more well-known Chinese games, so if you want to learn even more about this part of the franchise, you can check that video out after this one. But in that video, there were some games that I avoided, and it seems like you guys wanted to see me cover some more of these. Well, I'm not one to shy away from an opportunity like that, so in today's video, we will be exploring even deeper into the world of Chinese PVZ games. But before we get into things here, I would like to clarify that covering these games is not easy in the slightest, as some of them are just simply obscure. So with that being said, if I mess anything up, I apologize for it, but I can't really do a whole lot about it, unfortunately. Okay, with that disclaimer out of the way, let's get right into it, starting with Alright, here's pretty much the only other well-known Chinese game that I haven't covered yet. So, in order to understand what this game is, let's first talk about the Android TV, the device this game was made for. According to Google, the Android TV is a smart TV operating system based on Android and developed by Google for television sets, digital media players, set-top boxes, and soundbars. So, in other words, it's kind of like Google's version of a smart TV. And with that knowledge, I think you can kind of understand what this port is really all about. Using a surprisingly genius control scheme for a TV remote, you can now play what is basically the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 versions of Plants vs. Zombies 1. Only now there's some cut content. It's kind of basic, but it's pretty interesting regardless. And what's even more interesting about this version is the fact that it doesn't have as many changes as the other Chinese PVZ1 games. There's no Great Wall aesthetic here, no weird walnut heroes, and not even much extra content. The only real changes simply make the adventure mode tougher, and there's also now microtransactions. Wow, very Angry Birds of you, PopCap, I suppose? Oh, and I feel like I should go over just how much tougher the adventure is in particular, because ooh, that's rough looking. I suppose this was done to make the microtransactions much more appealing, which is scummy by the way. But like, guys, we did not need screen door zombies in the first few levels of the game, come on now. Overall, this port seems fine, I suppose. Not really bad or anything, it just seems like much more of a cash grab than anything else. You could pretty easily download this game, but me personally, I think I'm good. I already have the superior way. Okay, ways to play this game. But if you're looking for a pretty unfair challenge and you don't have access to PVZ1 on Steam, then this will do, I suppose. Okay, this is future me popping into this segment here. So first of all, I actually did end up playing a little bit of this game, and if you want to get the game for yourself, there will be a tutorial link in the description down below. But anyways, the reason why I ended up playing this game is a bit interesting, as the game itself is actually bugged. Let me explain. So essentially, right after level 3-9, the rest of the game is pretty easy and tame compared to what you were facing up to that point. And as it turns out, that's because the game is bugged, and the rest of the levels are basically the normal adventure. It's pretty funny to think about, especially if you know the track record of the Chinese games. But yeah, I figured I'd clear that up before I got any comments about it. Okay, back to the video, pretend like this is a good segue, and with this game out of the way, now we can move on to some of the more interesting titles, such as hey, did you know that PopCap tried to make an educational PVZ game called Use Your Brains EDU? Yeah, that's definitely one of the more obscure pieces of trivia in this franchise. And needless to say, but it was obscure for a reason, it's kinda bad. Well, China decided to give it a whirl as well, this time being all about teaching Chinese Pinyin. That's actually a pretty cool idea, so I'm on board. Let's see what this game is all about. So, this game basically teaches you the subject matter through various means. Some ways include listening and correctly identifying what is being said. And other ways include flat out looking at Chinese Pinyin as well. This is all taught to you, then eventually used in the gameplay itself. And with the gameplay, you just correctly answer what the game throws at you in order to move throughout the levels. It's pretty basic stuff, and it doesn't really work like a normal PVZ game, but it's neat regardless. The game itself seems like it was a good way to learn Pinyin as well. But you could only play 5 tutorial levels, then you had to pay for the rest of them if you wanted to pursue this. And that's not even the worst part if you can believe it. This game also has like no footage on the normal internet. I don't think there is a single video on regular old YouTube about this game, and if there is, then it got no attention or it's in a different language. There is remaining footage of the game on sites like Bilibili, but that's it. Simply put, this game kind of vanished randomly according to the wiki, so whatever happened to the game is a complete mystery to me, but regardless, it did seem interesting. It could have been a fun learning tool for the people who wanted to learn Pinyin, but I digress. Oh, and wait, what's this? There's actually apparently one more thing I needed to know about this game too? Well, hang on a second, let me look into this.
恭喜你，漂亮地打败了2大波僵尸，顺便掌握了啊呜波泼摩佛7个拼音。
Ooh, I am not touching that at all. Let's quickly move on to... Have you ever wanted to play PVZ 2 but with a score mechanic? Well, first of all, Arena exists, but second of all, this game can also fulfill that need. Yay, I guess? Okay, let's just get right into things here. This is Plants vs. Zombies 2. Well, okay, it's early Chinese Plants vs. Zombies 2. And with those two sentences, I basically just explained 90% of the game to you. Yeah, fun. Alright, maybe I'm not doing this game justice. Let's talk about the main difference between this game and what early PVZ2 had to offer. So this game has a score system, like I had mentioned before. This score system allows you to essentially compare level scores to others online, and that's a pretty neat idea. It seems like a more modern PVZ Social Edition, and it's funny that I thought of that game here because this game is also now defunct. I don't know what you expected. This is the Chinese games we're talking about. We're lucky to even have one active game. There's other parts of this game that I didn't mention here, but I'm gonna be blunt. Do you really want to learn more about a PVZ2 game that has 3 worlds, and one that was also actively being supported up to 2016? Okay, maybe you do, but I'm not really the person to ask. I looked around for some more information on this game, and the best I could come up with was a trailer that showed some trading elements. Okay, I'll admit, that's kind of neat, but it's not neat enough to save this game from mediocrity. And I think that's a great segue into the second half of this video. That being all about... Alright, it's about time I mentioned the mini programs. So in my last video, I didn't really talk about these games at all. I discussed one of them very briefly, which was Plants vs. Zombies 3D, and even then, I didn't really know a whole lot about that game. But anyways, the reason why I'm bringing this up now is simply because I didn't dig deep into what exactly these games were. So with that being said, allow me to briefly talk about it now. The way you could play a large majority of these games is by having one of a few different Chinese social media apps on your phone or web browser, as well as having a registered account. So in a way, these games are sort of like smaller PVZ titles, I guess. It's pretty confusing stuff, and I learned a lot about this because of this person, who I will call ARC for the remainder of this section. I wanted to include them in this video because they've been really helpful when it comes to learning more about this side of the franchise, like telling me all about Taco-chan, 2C's mascot. Honestly, if I wasn't going to mention it here, I was not going to mention it anywhere else, so yeah, needless to say, very interesting stuff, and ARC, if you're watching this video, again, thank you so much. Moving forward, I figured I should also add a little disclaimer here about the fact that all of these games have Plants vs. Zombies 2 somewhere in the title. Why they were named this way is a complete mystery to me, but I digress. Keep that in the back of your mind moving forward, as most of these games have nothing to do with PVZ2's gameplay. Finally, I'm not covering all of these. There are, at a minimum, 35 confirmed games we could talk about here. No, not happening at all. In this video at least. I'll cover some of the games here, but that's all I'm going to be able to feasibly do. Alright, so with all of that out of the way, let's first cover the games that I actually gave some spotlight to previously. That being... Are ya ready, kids? Well, I'm not. Oh boy. So let me start out by crushing the dreams of so many of you here. This game has nothing to do with a sponge that lives in a pineapple under the sea. As much as it hurts to say Sponge Pea Shooter Pants isn't real, it's actually just what most assume is fan art that was used to depict the PVZ game. This is a Chinese game, so it's probably legal there, but regardless, it's very immoral. Anyways, for the game itself, it's interesting, I suppose. So essentially, this game acts like a mix between a regular tower defense game and 2048. That is a really weird combination, but I assure you, it looks better than it sounds. So the lawn itself isn't very big. Normally it's just 8 tiles, and the area around the lawn is the path where the zombies walk. The gameplay loop here is pretty simple. The zombies walk from one side to another, and if they reach the end of their path, the game ends and you have to restart the level. The idea here is that you drag plants onto the lawn over time, and these plants can merge to create better plants. That's where the whole 2048 part comes in. It's a surprisingly neat concept, and the levels themselves seem interesting too. But honestly, I'm a little bit mad at this game because there's no mention of the absorbent porous yellow sponge, so let's move on before we don't have the best day ever. I'm so sad. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, I did briefly discuss a game called PVZ 3D in my last Chinese games video, and I didn't really give that game the time of day because, well, look at it. I'm bringing this up for a reason now, because there's another game that is very similar to that one, which is Plants vs Zombies 2 Guard. This game is like PVZ 3D, only now you can merge plants to make them better. Hey, now wait a minute. This is very similar to Expedition, and despite the new design, this game looks worse. I mean, the quality is relatively the same because this footage was found in the depths of the internet, but the gameplay itself just looks worse in comparison to the SpongeBob Me Boy game. Honestly, I don't think I want to give this game more time than it really deserves, because the next title is much more interesting, that being... Wait a minute, this game is actually cool? What? Okay, so this game follows the same merging formula that the other games I've covered use for the plants, which is pretty basic, but whatever. What is not basic is the fact that this is a genuine tower defense game. Like, this is actually a normal game in the genre, and that's really interesting. The waves come in one by one, and you have to place your plants on some available spaces. That alone makes this game much more intriguing, but there's more depth to the system. The merge mechanic itself works differently than I had alluded to before, as now you can only level up your plants on the board by merging plants you could buy with coin drops from zombies down below in this UI here. Once you merge these plants to the level that the board plant is at, only then can you make it stronger on the board. It makes for a pretty interesting gameplay loop, and the game itself has a decent amount of variety in the types of plants too. From the gameplay that I watched, the game itself does a lot of pretty cool things here and there, like having bosses every once in a while that test your defenses. Also, whenever you let a zombie get to the end of the path here, you simply go back one level. That is really tame, and I actually appreciate that a lot. So overall, World is seemingly a pretty decent game. I can tell you right now that I would play this game if I had nothing better to do, and I'm giving this game a lot more credit than some of the other games in this video, such as... Oh, you know I had to go for some deep cuts with this video at some point. You want to see how obscure this one is? This is the video that I got gameplay of this game from. Yeah, this game is pretty unknown. Even the wiki doesn't have much on the game, and that is really saying something. The wiki has a page for a Chinese augmented reality storybook game, and honestly, you probably didn't even know that existed. So there's your bit of trivia for today, you're welcome. Anyways, for the game itself, it's fine. You play as Crazy Dave, and you whack zombies with 2 shovels to kill them. It's weird, but if the game had more to offer, then I don't think it would be so bad. Notice how I said if the game had more to offer. It doesn't at all, so that's fun. Yeah, there's nothing to this game besides that gimmick. You just tap the screen to kill zombies, and you get stronger as you go on. I don't think a single person out of these 90 viewers genuinely cares about it, so yeah, there's that. But we're not quite done with obscure entries, oh no. Up next, we have... Huh. That's a rather weird name, isn't it? We already have a world in PVZ2 called Ancient Egypt, so what's the deal here? Well, I can't really answer that part, but what I can answer is the age-old question that I'm sure everybody's asked themselves at least once. Does China have a PVZ game about Egypt? Okay, so admittedly, maybe not everybody's asked themselves that, but I have, and this game answers that weird question. So this is... how do I say it nicely? It's just Ancient Egypt from PVZ2, but worse. That's the game. I can't even begin to describe to you what I'm looking at. I see a lot of 2C elements, such as the immense amount of crap thrown at you in the menus, as well as the kook. But man, if my life relied on my knowledge of this game, then... I'm not gonna finish that, but you get the idea. I did look around the wiki and some walkthroughs for any other information on the game, and I came up empty-handed. Suppose that says a lot about this title, as well as a lot of these smaller games in general. If PopCap hardly cares about these titles, then there's really no good reason for the community to care either. And while that is a pretty sad note to end on, I have just one more game I'd like to cover in this video that I was told to cover by a lot of people. And oh boy, this one's gonna scar you if you didn't know about it. So without any further ado, let's go over oh god, how do I explain this? Okay, so let's start off with some basics here. If you've been on the internet for a while, and you have a passive interest in gaming, then I'm sure you know about those types of ROM hacks and mods for some games. You know, the ones that replace a character or something in the game itself with an anime girl or two. And now that I've mentioned that, I think you know exactly where this is going. Evolve replaces some plants with anime girls. Oh no, I can't even begin to describe the absurdity of this game, and it seems like there's little to no footage of the game itself on the internet. Seriously, this game is so cursed that even the Chinese audience didn't want to play this crap. And you want to know the worst part? The gameplay itself kind of looks like a normal PVZ tower defense game too. That makes it one of the better games in this video, and I hate every bit of that. I just don't feel comfortable even discussing this game any further. So let's move on to the conclusion of this video. I'm done looking at this. So overall, the games we covered today are all around pretty weird. Does that really shock you? I hope not. I've made 2 videos on this topic already, and if you still don't believe that, then I don't know what to tell you. But I'll say this much, while there were a lot more mediocre games in this video, there were also some pretty interesting ones as well. The deeper you dig into the Chinese games, the more you realize that yes, there is a lot of garbage, but there's also quite a bit of gold just waiting to be found. And with that, I think I'll end this video here. We could go a lot further with the remaining mini-program games, and even some of the extra games that I didn't mention, so if you really want to see that video, I could make one final video discussing that topic. But I think for now, I'm kind of done just talking about some of these games. But for what it's worth, I appreciate you guys joining me on this journey regardless. It means a lot to me. When I made that initial Chinese games video, I had no idea it was going to be as big as it was. So seeing so many people ask for a second video is crazy to me, and I hope this video was enjoyable to those of you who wanted to see more. If you guys are new around here and you like what you see, then subscribe. It helps me out a ton, and I have some pretty cool projects in the works that you might enjoy. As for me, I'm gonna go back to pretending like Evolve doesn't exist, so I suppose I'll see you guys in my next video. Peace.